Welcome to Public Affairs Roundtable, a discussion of current events in the nation and around the world and how they affect the people of Indiana. Here's your moderator, Larry Lough.
We've just passed up Labor Day, that holiday that signals the end of summer, the beginning of the campaign season. But a lot of people are looking beyond the 87 municipal elections in Indiana toward 88 and beyond. Our guest today is someone who probably will play an important role in Indiana politics, Democratic politics in the years to come. He is Secretary of State Evan Bayh, who was elected last November, took office in December, an Indianapolis attorney who will be talking with us today about a number of things, himself included. Also with us, John Rouse, executive producer of Public Affairs Roundtable and a member of the political science faculty here at Ball State. Evan, you were with us about 6 or 7 months ago, shortly after you took office. The last question we ask you, hesitantly, having just been elected Secretary of State, is are you running for governor in 88? A lot of speculation then. It hasn't subsided much, though you've not committed. There have been committees around the state trying to push you into the campaign, if we might say that. Have you come any closer to a decision than you were 6 or 7 months ago?
Yes, I have, Larry. I've tried to go about this decision-making process in a steady, deliberate manner. It's a decision of such magnitude that, of course, the first people I would talk with would be my family, my wife in particular. And after talking with Susan and getting her assurance that she would support me wholeheartedly, whatever my choice was, I then went into to think about what agenda of issues would be important for the state of Indiana, what the next governor of the state should be involved addressing on behalf of our citizens. And then we've begun to explore some of the practical facts that have to be involved in any campaign. Raising funds, looking where the support lies and that sort of thing. So we have formed a committee for the purposes of testing the waters to determine whether the effort would be feasible or not. And as you're probably aware, I believe that the local elections are very important and that I should not do anything to muddy those waters before we've elected our local candidates. So I'll be waiting to make a final decision until after this November. But we have moved I'd say a considerable distance since the last time we were together.
We see Frank O'Bannon, a state senator from southern Indiana, in the race. Steve Daley, Kokomo mayor, in the race. Already announced, already campaigning, raising funds. Yet Wayne Townsend, who was the nominee in 84, has said, if Evan Bayh runs, I don't run. Does that endorsement mean anything to you?
It means a great deal to me, Larry. I have a great deal of respect for Wayne. He was in the state legislature for 24 years and came within an eyelash of being our state's governor in the 1984 election. I have a tremendous amount of respect for him, as I do for former Governor Matt Welsh, who made a similar statement some time ago. He, as you know, is the only living Democrat to have served as governor of the state of Indiana, and the fact that he and Wayne would both place their confidence in me meant a great deal to me.
Can you put a percentage on, yes, I'm going to run? Is it 50-50 now? Is it 60-40 yes?
Oh, it's hard to quantify. I'd have to say, Larry, that if everything continues to go as it has to date, that would be my decision to go forward. But as you know, in life, and particularly in political life, anything's possible. So I'd say I'm leaning in that direction, but we'll wait until after November to make a final decision.
It seems almost as if it were perhaps 95%, because I know that Wayne Townsend really wanted to be governor. So it would seem to me that if he had decided not to run for office, that you indeed would be the candidate. So it seems that it's not just 60% or 75%, it's like 95%. Isn't it almost that close?
Well, John, you're more of a statistician than I am. I'd have to say it's very close. I can't put a statistical percentage on it. Wayne and I have been friends for a long time. I campaigned quite actively on his behalf in 1984, and I wish that he had been elected governor. He, as you're aware, I'm sure, took a public opinion poll to see what the public thought about the race and how it would shape up, and determined that I would be an effective candidate, and I think he believes personally I would be a good governor. So I indicated to him that I was leaning strongly in that direction.
But would it not be very unfair to him for you to indicate that you're going to run and then all of a sudden not run? Because he seemed like he really wanted to be governor, ran twice, was willing to run again. But he stepped aside for Evan Bayh.
Yes, he did, John. In my discussions with Wayne, I indicated to him that I believe that it would take something that at this point was not foreseeable. But then again, from time to time, the unforeseeable happens in public life. So that was the gist of our conversation.
You raised the name of Matt Welch. It has been a long, long time since Indiana has elected a Democrat governor, 1964, I believe. Do you think 88 looks any better than the last several governor's elections, which not coincidentally coincide with the presidential elections?
I believe it looks better, Larry, and a lot of it has to do with nonpartisan factors, although there are some important things at play that I think will tend to benefit the Democratic Party. I don't think we'll be facing a national landslide as we did in 1980 or 1984 with the tremendous popularity of President Reagan. There will be a non-incumbent running on the Republican side. I am hopeful and expect that we will nominate a moderate on the Democratic side, and I think that will favor our party. Here in the state, after 20 years of one-party rule, I feel that there is a growing feeling on behalf of the public that it's time for a breath of fresh air in state government, that we've gotten a larger, less efficient state government, that maybe we need some new energy that a fresh perspective would bring, and I think that all bodes well for the candidate on our side of the aisle. So I think that, well, that and the fact that we were successful last year in the face of a very strong race by Senator Quayle, we won the state by 125,000 votes. I think that all bodes very well.
If I could ask you about the major support for the Democratic Party in this state, of course, has been organized labor. The tenor of labor throughout the country, throughout Indiana, has been changing. People are still concerned about labor and how labor is implemented and the dynamics of labor, but they're less concerned about organized labor. How is the Democratic Party going to change to reflect those different kinds of values to support you?
I think, John, there's an increasing awareness that we can't just be a party of groups, that we have to be a party that understands the general welfare and not just the welfare of special interests. Organized labor has been and will continue to be an important part of the Democratic Party coalition, and I believe that the interests of working men and women do have a great deal to do with the general welfare. I think that we understand that in this day and age we gain more from cooperation than confrontation. And I think that perhaps both management and labor understand that, and we'll see a greater willingness on the part of all concerned to work together to accomplish mutual objectives so that we don't lose our plants and industries to the Japanese and the Taiwanese and others. So I see perhaps militancy on both sides of the aisle changing, and a little more moderation, a little more willingness to work together. Our party will always be the party of working men and women, but perhaps how we pursue that will change a bit.
So there's going to be a focus upon responsibility by labor for production. Is that a fair way of assessing it?
Productivity has to be a major part of improving the economy of our country. There's no question about that. On the flip side of that, security for the workforce, treating workers who are injured on the workplace fairly, those sorts of issues are very important, and I think there's a lot of talk in business circles about the Japanese School of Management or the European School of Management. Part of that is increased security for the workers in exchange for greater productivity and greater efforts to help improve the competitiveness of the company, because competitiveness aids workers as well as management. And I think that is the bottom line. How do we compete?
Sure.
You made a comment about the size and growth of state government, which I inferred to mean some criticism of the organization, perhaps, of state government. You've been in state government now for 9 months. Do you see a need to reorganize state government much as the way you've approached the office of Secretary of State?
Unquestionably, Larry. I think one of the first things the next governor needs to do, whoever that may be, is to bring in a team of organizational experts, much as we did in the Secretary of State's office, and to really take a look at where we can cut the fat, where we can build muscle, and where we can do a better job of providing goods and services to the public. I think if you take a look at the last 8 years or the last 20 years, you'll see that we're spending more money after adjustment for inflation. We have a larger state workforce. We have more bureaus and agencies and commissions. And yet the administration itself churns out statistics almost daily that indicate that our highways are in disrepair, our bridges need to be improved, our SAT scores and other indicia of education aren't where they ought to be. We've lost quite a bit in the way of heavy manufacturing, industrial, high-quality jobs. These are all things that I think can be addressed by having a leaner, tighter, more efficient state government, freeing up millions of dollars for use in more worthwhile things. So I see that as a major part of what needs to be done. In our own office, we cut our budget by 5% after needed improvements, and we've reduced my staff by 20%. and all this at a time when we're getting more work done. And I think that has to be getting back. I think what John mentioned is what's taking place in the private sector, an emphasis on improving the bottom line, competitiveness. I think we need that in the public sector as well. How do we do the job better? I think that has to be the focus of the next administration.
Indiana is pretty much a Republican, it's a conservative Republican state, but it surprised me as an observer of politics and of government that so many Republicans have been elected consecutively, that at some point Hoosiers seem to say, we've had enough of that for a while, let's try something different. Have some of the problems, we can call them problems, perhaps complacency in state government, be attributed to the fact that Republicans have been elected in every election since '68?
I think that's right. Larry, you look at the private sector, and it's that competition that makes people do better. It increases efficiency. And it's supposed to be the two-party system that does that in politics. And whenever you have one group of people that dominates any area of state government, in this case state government, for 20 consecutive years, there's a certain amount of complacency that sets in. And what I've seen from my tenure in the State House is there's a certain acceptance of business as usual. No one is asking the question anymore, how can we do better? And when that happens, we waste tax dollars and we don't get the job done the way we should. So,
if you do run for governor, you're going to be running by the name of Evan Bayh. However, when you become governor, you might as well be, in a sense, Evan Smith. Now, Mr. Smith is going to have to influence a new group of people to be active in government. And it seems that the Republicans have an infrastructure, a system of bringing people into government. What's going to be your system, or what's going to be your infrastructure to bring people from the Democratic ranks, party ranks, into your administration? Whom are you going to reach out to?
well, I will reach out, if I am fortunate enough to be in that position, John, to a variety of people, from academia, from industry, from labor, for instance. It has to be a cross-section. I believe very strongly in getting the best people, wherever you may find them, because it will take the best minds and the best talents to move this state forward. I not long ago had a chance to visit with many of the staff members of Governor Dukakis from Massachusetts. I was there on a conference for all the secretaries of state from around the country, and I was very impressed with the real dynamic energy and the commitment to state government that those people brought to the task. And that's what I'd like to see, not just bureaucrats, but people who are willing to come in for a period of time, limited perhaps to several years, to do the job, to make state government more efficient, and then to go back into the private sector. So I'll cast my net far afield, John, to get the best people.
Is there a special image that you would like to try to create in the future for the state? What kinds of changes in the image are going to come about?
I think it's time for Indiana to be on the move again, John. I think that too often in the past we have looked at programs not in terms of whether they were sound investments, but instead whether it required some upfront capital on the part of the people of our state. If we are going to compete with Ohio and Illinois and Michigan, let alone the Japanese and the West Germans, it is going to take a good transportation system. Our state is called the crossroads of America, and yet our highways are crumbling. It's going to take the best education system we can build for our children to train them to meet the jobs of the future. I would like to see the traditional values of this state preserved, in the sense that we emphasize fiscal economy, frugal management of state government, but not to the point where we're not willing to make those necessary investments in the basics: education, transportation, a solid workforce. So it's a return to the basics, I think. How do we do the job of state government better?
Your father was often called a liberal. Matter of fact, he was defeated, I think, because conservatives and people on the right were able to convince enough people that, in fact, he was a liberal, at least liberal in Washington, D.C., if not a conservative moderate in Indiana. You're talking pretty conservatively here today. Do you have a label? Do you like to project yourself as something or another? Where do you fit in the political spectrum?
Well, Larry, that's difficult to say. I normally reject labels because I think they're really substitutes for intelligent thought. I don't think you can categorize things that easily. I'd say if any particular label fit me, it would probably be a pragmatist. I am an idealist, but I think that the business of government is improving the real world and creating more opportunity, in fact, for people, not just in theory. So I don't think the labels liberal and conservative can be used with much accuracy anymore. at least not in my own case. I'm a fiscal conservative, but one of the reasons for that is that I believe that through using those funds, rather than wasting them through inefficiency, if we use the funds to retrain workers, to educate our children, to build highways and roads, that's what state government is all about. We can't afford to waste that money. And it's because state government can do so much that it angers me when I see waste.
You sound like you've thought out the process, solidified the issues for what that might well be involved in the governor's race in '88. Do you think those issues have pretty much solidified whether you or someone else is a candidate? Is there a clear Democratic position versus a Republican position?
I think that the issues are clear, Larry, and the issues are the basics. One of the things that's helped me to solidify them are the town hall meetings I've held around the state of Indiana. I have one about every 10 days or 2 weeks now where I just call on ordinary citizens and get the benefit of their thoughts and criticisms and suggestions about where the state needs to head. People are concerned about the bread and butter. What kind of future are they going to have economically? How about their children's education? What about the roads that are so important to the future of the state? Are their tax dollars being wisely used? I found that people don't mind paying taxes for worthy causes, but if they feel they're not getting their money's worth, that makes them good and mad, and with justification. So I think those are the specific issues. The real overarching theme is how do we improve the efficiency of state government to get Indiana on the move again? That's what I think the theme of the next campaign will be about.
Well, it seems if that's going to be the case that we have to get back to education. You talk about the traditional values of the state, and it's very true that we have a very good work ethic. People really enjoy doing their work. As you imply, all of that is changing because the economy is always changing. How do we reinvigorate education so we can train this person who indeed wants to work, but his or her job is being done away with? How do we raise taxes, put more money into a viable program to keep it going?
That's a great question, John, and I want to take this opportunity to say that I compliment the governor, who happens to be of the other party, for putting education at the front of the agenda for this last session of the General Assembly. But I should also say that one initiative or two initiatives in 20 years is not good enough. We need an enduring commitment to education in this state. And what that means is not only emphasizing programs like Prime Time to benefit our youngsters, but retraining displaced workers. I think the latest statistics show that people coming into the workforce today will have 5 or as many as 6 career changes during the course of their productive lives. And what that does is it places an emphasis on having good fundamental building blocks from our public institutions of learning, and it also emphasizes having retraining programs for people who are displaced. It's very difficult for people to go from heavy manufacturing to some of the high-tech service jobs that are now being created. But that is the direction the economy is heading in. And it's not so much manufacturing on the one hand versus the service economy on the other. It's how do you get high-paying, good-quality jobs in whichever sector they might happen to be located.
Yeah, it seems to me that we in this state, especially organized labor, has produced or helped produce a passive citizen. In other words, if you lose your job, you get 18 months of unemployment compensation at 75% of what you used to make. So instead of that person being active to go out and fight the environment to find new work, he or she becomes passive, sits back, and lets things happen to him. How does labor get into this picture to produce active thinking minds as opposed to passive minds?
We're in a changed environment, John. I think that the old unemployment compensation situation was predicated on the cyclical view of the economy, where we would have temporary downturns and then there would automatically be a return to good times. That's not what we're seeing in this economy. What we're seeing in this economy is a long-term erosion of the quality of our economy. We are losing permanently some of the high-quality jobs to foreign countries and to our sister states. And what that means is that after 18 months, those jobs may not still have come back. And that places a premium on a new kind of thinking. How do we rehabilitate people, retrain people for the jobs that will be here, not those that have gone forever? And I think labor understands that. I really do. And with a helping hand from state government, I think we can prepare our workforce for the jobs of today and tomorrow, not the jobs of yesterday.
We touched earlier, you mentioned the presidential election, which also happens to be in 1988. Have any of the many Democratic candidates who are campaigning around the nation been in contact with you or your office, specifically you, I guess, regarding support, regarding campaigning in the state? Have they been in touch with you at all?
Of Quite a few of them have, Larry. I'm sort of the lone ranger as far as statewide officials are concerned in the Democratic Party, so several of them have, yes.
What sort of things are they looking for your support, or are they just trying to feel you out as to what you're going to do and who you will support? Or
some of both. They'd like advice about how to approach the citizens of our state, how to organize for the primary in May of next year. They've been kind enough in some cases to ask for my thoughts, and I think mostly, Larry, they just want to introduce themselves and ask for my support. So,
if talk is Gary Hart might get back in the race. Speaking of advice, do you have advice for Gary Hart in that direction?
I would advise the senator against doing that. He's put himself and his family through enough, and gosh, it's up to him to decide, Larry, but my advice would be it'd probably be very difficult for him to succeed.
If I could take us back to the Indiana situation, do you feel being the leader of the party and so much pressure, Evan Bayh is the leader, he's our hope, do you feel too much pressure in this regard? That there's too much pressure upon you to be the one focal point for the Democrat?
No, I don't feel that much pressure, John, and I'll tell you why. I don't view myself as the only hope for the party. We have a number of talented people in this party. You mentioned two of them who've already announced that they're running for governor. And if I have a contribution to make, which I hope I do, I will make it. But I will not be making it alone. So I hope that my views find favor with my party. I'm gratified by their support and the support of others in the public. But, this is all larger than any one person. And I don't view myself as being the only person out there helping to lead the way.
As you weigh this contribution, are you also weighing the possibility of not running for governor, but perhaps running for lieutenant governor? Is that an option?
No, Larry, I haven't really considered that. I'm enjoying being an independent executive in state government. Frankly, I think it would be somewhat frustrating for me to not be able to really implement my views.
We talked earlier before the program about some of the changes you've made in your office since then, computerization being one of them. To what extent has it reorganized how you do what you do in your office?
We have really scaled down the size of our office since I've taken office, and again, it reflects some of the changes in the private economy as well. Our first objective was to see if we couldn't do a better job of handling our resources and performing our tasks and save the taxpayers some money. And we've done that by bringing in the computers, including the cost of putting in the computers and purchasing the hardware. Even after having paid for all that, we've cut our budget by 5%. And by doing away with some of the little things like they used to have a free towel service for the kitchenette, they used to have a number of perks that were there in the office. We reverted to the state general fund 1.5% of our budget. We turned back to the taxpayers of the state at the end of the fiscal year in July. So by introducing computers and engaging in some other efficiency steps, we have saved some money. It means that we have a smaller workforce, but they're getting more done. We've cut our workforce by about 20%, Larry, and I think that's the most dramatic impact from the computerization.
And people say, well, you're just doing that because you're running for governor, because you want to run. That's politics. That, in fact, you're just doing it to make Republicans in the State House look bad.
Well, I suppose, Larry, people will say that about whatever I do, but I think that saving taxpayers money is my foremost obligation. I think improving the efficiency of state government and providing better goods and services is my duty. And if I were to do anything else, then I think I would be open to real criticism, and justifiably so. So we're going to stick to our guns and keep going.
It seems that for the last several years, for the time that I've been in this state, which has been since 1976, that the Democratic Party has not really been viable because it doesn't reach out to enough groups, as you say. But in this instance, it seems if you could appeal to more business types of people, question, do you find that businessmen and business people are coming to your support this time?
I've been very encouraged, John. One of the things that I believe government should be about is forming consensus, bringing people together. We've talked quite a bit about labor. I'm glad that the subject of management has now come up. I think we need to try and find common ground because we have so much more to gain by working together than we do by squabbling and fighting. It only hamstrings our state when we have fallings out like that. And I think one of the most encouraging signs I've seen are the number of business people who say, Evan, we agree with you. We need to make state government more efficient, and we want to work with you to make that happen. So I think that is indicative of the broadening of the base of the Democratic Party.
If I could follow up, who do you think is going to be your opponent if you decide to run for governor?
On the Republican side,
right.
John, well, I've made it a commitment not to meddle in the internal politics of the other party. I'm not terribly knowledgeable on what they do when they're in their caucus, so I better refrain from comment on that. They have at least two fine people who've talked about running.
Is the 88 election going to be different in Indiana? I mean, you're taking a middle-of-the-road stand, a really a kind of stand that is far from partisan, that in fact seems to be a kind of stand that will appeal to the independent voter. Granted, you'll take the Democratic vote, but are voters getting smarter, less partisan? What kind of voter do you appeal to?
Sure they are, Larry. I think that voters are very intelligent, and they're very discriminating in that they really look at people and they look at issues. And I think if that were ever in doubt, you can look at the results of the elections last year and see that on the top two lines on the ballot, 30% of the people in the state, 1 out of every 3 people who walked behind that curtain, voted for Dan Quayle for the United States Senate and Evan Bayh on the very next line for Secretary of State. That shows that they know how to split their tickets and that they can differentiate between candidates. And I think we've reached a point where, in my own belief, good government is good politics. People are smart enough to recognize that. If you stand for what's best for the state, people will recognize that and they'll support you regardless of the party label. Parties are still important. That's absolutely true. And they stand for some fundamental ideals that go back to the very founding of our country. But when it comes to the specific issues of the day, I think people want to know who can do the job.
Are the political parties in the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, no longer in and of themselves relevant to society as a whole? I mean, are they too narrow?
One of the points I think I mentioned previously was the fact that because of one-party dominance in the State House, I think we've seen a more lethargic state government evolve. I think it's that the competition between the different parties that makes office holders try harder to do a better job. They know that if they don't perform, they'll be tossed out. What's dangerous, Larry, is when you have a group of people down there who take for granted the fact that they're going to be reelected and reelected and reelected, and they can take the attitude that, well, we don't care whether we do our jobs or not, we're going to be returned. That's dangerous. And that's why you need a strong two-party system, to provide the checks and balances that are necessary.
We're out of time today. Thanks to our guest, Evan Bayh, Secretary of State and possible candidate for another office at some future date. Thank you very much, Evan. Also, thanks to John Rouse, our executive producer, for being with us here today. I'm Larry Lough. Thank you for joining us.
If you have comments regarding this program, please address them to John Rouse, Box 149, Muncie, Indiana, 47305. The producer for Public Affairs Roundtable is John Rouse. Associate producers are Bill Mosier and Mike Seaborg. This program is a production of University Media Services, the Department of Political Science, and radio and television stations on the campus of Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana.